Good day, everyone, and welcome to today's event. My name is Michelle Cerisi, and I am the Associate Director of Marketing and Communications with the National Association for Business Economics. Before we start the program, I wanted to quickly point out a few other upcoming NAPE events and offerings. Register now for the 38th Annual NAPE Economic Policy Conference, March 20th through 22nd in Washington, D.C. Confirmed speakers include Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta President Raphael Bostic, and White House Council of Economic Advisors Chair Cecilia Rouse. Early bird registration is available through February 23rd. Please go to nape.com/events for more information. Early bird registration deadlines are also approaching for several of NAPE's educational offerings. Please visit nape.com/CBE for more information on these and other course offerings, as well as the Certified Business Economist Certification Program. Now on to today's event, part 4 of the CBE Careers in Economics webinar series, Insights from HR Professionals. Note that we will have Q&A open throughout today's discussion. You can submit a question to the panelists at any time using the Q&A box. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Emily Kolinsky-Morris, Chief Economist at Ford Motor Company. Emily, I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Hi, Michelle, and thank you for joining everyone. I'm so happy to be part of this wonderful series that NAPE has put together to help us all evaluate our options as we think about future careers in economics. We're going to begin with introductions from some of our panelists. We're going to start with our hiring managers, and then we will get a special presentation from the U.S. Department of Labor in just a minute. But let me start and ask Leila and Sean and then Michelle to introduce themselves and provide a brief overview of the hiring process at their organization. And please take a minute to share with us your own bios as well, because I'm sure our audience would love to hear how you got to hold your current position. So I'll kick it off right now for those brief introductions. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Emily.
Leila, maybe we'll have you go first.
Thank you, Emily. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Leah Assani. I'm a senior business economist with the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. In that capacity, I have the privilege of being able to brief our bank president in preparation for FOMC meetings. I typically brief him on what's happening in the regional economy. I also have the privilege of serving as an ambassador for the Dallas Fed through various speaking engagements that I do on behalf of the bank, as well as doing media interviews. And I also manage the internship as well as our research analyst program within the research department at the Dallas Fed. So the Federal Reserve being the US central bank, working at the central bank means that we all have the unique opportunity to be able to not only serve the public, but also be able to provide input into monetary policy for the US. And we do that through various ways. We do that, like I said, by briefing the bank president, keeping an eye on what's happening in the economy, and also conducting research on various topics. The Federal Reserve system has 12 regional banks, which are all independent, and they are kind of spread out geographically throughout the US. And then we have our Board of Governors, which is located in Washington, D.C. Among the 12 banks, as well as the board, we hire many professionals who have a passion for economics and are wanting to pursue a career in that field. We have various openings throughout the year that we recruit for, but the bulk of our hiring occurs in the fall, as well as in the early winter time frame when we are hiring for our PhD economists, our research analyst program, as well as our summer internships. The recruiting that happens in the fall is typically for a summer start date. So just a quick plug, if any of y'all are interested, this is the time to go ahead and apply for those positions. As far as the hiring process is concerned, it's typically a multiple rounds of interviews that we do with our candidates. The number of rounds really vary depending on what the position is. It can range from 2 to 4, again, depending on the level we are bringing the candidate in at. And as far as the multiple rounds of interviews are concerned, those happen both with the hiring manager, along with some of your colleagues that you will potentially be working with, as well as the heads of our different groups who are looking to hire. So with that, I'll take a pause and hand it off to Sean.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to start a timer here so I know how much time I've taken. My name is Sean Clement. I'm the Assistant Center Chief for Business Research at the Center for Economic Studies at the Census Bureau. My area primarily supports all of the economic programs within the Census Bureau. There's about 1,500 people that work in that area, and they do all kinds of weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual, and every 5-year economic data collections. And that data is used by the public generally, but also used by lots of other statistical agencies and policymakers throughout the government. I will say that we do hire economists, but we also hire lots of people with economic backgrounds in statisticians or mathematical statistician positions. So as a stat agency, we tend to hire not only economists, but people in other areas. My area in particular has, I would say, kind of 3 groups of economists in it. One is kind of like new PhDs that start at the GS, say, 12 or 13 level, and then more senior people. We also have a lot of kind of interns that are not necessarily students, but could be people who are done with their bachelor's degree or master's degree, and then are looking to maybe get some experience working at a federal agency or at a statistical agency, and are thinking about potentially going back to graduate school. We have kind of both kind of graduate students kind of who are currently enrolled and people who are completed with their course of study. So typically we do a lot of our recruiting and job application through USA Jobs. We also have kind of more informal, non-competitive ways of applying to the Census Bureau, and I'll show some slides at the end, and you'll have some links that you can go to. In terms of my team and sort of my approach, we work very closely with the human resources, and there's sort of like lots of kind of back and forth between my area, the hiring official, and the people that work for me, and the folks in the human resource division. We do a lot of the recruiting of candidates, like going out, talking to people about what it's like to work at the Census Bureau. And then HR does a lot of the qualifying and referring the qualified candidates to me and other hiring managers at the Census Bureau. And I would say that, like, in terms of my approach, it's a very kind of team-oriented approach, right? Lots of people are working on teams. They're interviewing with the team members that they'll be working with. So we'll have a lot more time to talk. So I'm going to turn it over to the next person.
That'll be Michelle Goeller, and then we'll move to the Department of Labor after that. So Michelle, we've got a couple Michelles on the call today, so we'll try to keep them straight.
Yes, there's a few of us. So my name is Michelle Goeller. I'm a senior talent acquisition specialist at IHS Markit. For those of you who are unfamiliar with IHS Markit, we are an information services company and world leader in critical information, analytics, and solutions for major industries and markets that drive economies worldwide. The 3 key sectors we operate in are financial services, energy, and transportation. IHS Markit has more than 50,000 business and government customers, including 80% of the Fortune Global 500 companies. Some of you may already be aware, but in November of 2020, it was announced that IHS Markit will be merging with S&P Global, a transaction value of $44 billion. This was one of the largest mergers announced in 2020. The transaction will bring together 2 companies with highly complementary assets, which will further enhance the ability to provide its customers with the technology, data, and intelligence necessary to make strategic decisions. So just a little bit of context about iJust Market, because some people aren't too familiar with us, and also the merger with S&P. So now I can explain my role in talent acquisition. So as a recruiter, I am responsible for recruiting a variety of roles. However, I personally primarily support our financial services division and recruit for positions such as economists, data scientists, quants, and many other positions that require technical modeling and research skills. I partner closely with our hiring managers to understand the qualifications and skills they are looking for so that I can review and identify resumes that meet their expectations. Once the manager has reviewed the resumes and determined interest, I will reach out to that candidate for a phone screen and see if they have the specific qualifications the manager is looking for. I then provide my feedback back to the manager and discuss the best path forward. And all of our current openings are posted on our career site, which we will provide a link to at the end of this.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle. Now we will hear from the Department of Labor in just a minute. They'll give an overview of the USA Jobs platform, but let's start first with a little bit of a update. I think many of you on the call are probably familiar with econjobs.org, which is NAPE's job search platform. But just to provide a quick overview of that, this is a site where candidates can search for job openings. You can build a profile. You can upload a resume. And in fact, when you upload your resume, you can even choose to suppress your name and suppress the candidate profile in case you prefer to remain anonymous as people are searching the database. Which is a nice feature for those who are maybe looking while already holding a position. The employers can also search the site, searching for economists with specific skills like econometrics or experience with a particular statistical program. And you can set up a search agent so that new job matches are mailed to you when they hit the site. So if you're not already familiar with econjobs.org, I would definitely recommend, both as a hiring manager and as a candidate, that you check that out. But we also know that government agencies hire hundreds of economists, or as Sean pointed out, maybe they're not called economists, but individuals with an economics background to fill roles every year. And so to find and apply for those jobs, you have to be familiar with a site called USA Jobs. So we're going to have Michelle Horst and Kristen Nath from the Department of Labor, who are going to provide us a brief overview tutorial of usajobs.gov. So I will hand it over to Michelle Horst now for that update.
Actually, I'm going to introduce myself. Good afternoon. My name is Kristen Nathy.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Kristen.
Yeah, no problem. I am an HR staffing specialist with the Department of Labor, and I do recruitment and placement services for the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the national offices within BLS.
Hello, good afternoon, and welcome everyone. I'm Michelle Horst. I'm also an HR specialist with the Department of Labor, providing recruitment services to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is the nation's premier statistical agency in the broad field of labor economics and statistics. Today, we're going to give you a brief overview of how the federal application process works and let you know some common pitfalls to avoid so you can be better informed when searching for and applying for jobs. So I'm going to go ahead and screen share here. The main website that you're going to conduct all of your federal hiring search and applications is known as usajobs.gov. And once you access the site, I would encourage you to create a profile, which you can do right here if you don't already have one. It's going to let you have the opportunity to save your favorite job searches and receive email notifications, upload your resume and any other documentations that's required for the application, make your resume searchable, and apply for the jobs all right here on the website. USA Jobs also allows you to create a very basic job search. Right here, you can access using keywords and or location of desire. So for example, you can enter in data analyst, or let's type in economist. So if I enter in economist, you can see it is going to pull up a result of 87 different jobs that are relevant to that single search. Whenever you see a list of postings, this is a job opportunity announcement. It's going to give you a brief snapshot of what that is with the title, the agency, open and close date, starting salary, and the general scheduled GS pay scales, which you can learn more on opm.gov, and what type of appointment and whether it's full-time or part-time. But let's go ahead and narrow that search. So if you see over here in the right-hand column, there's some filter settings. Let's narrow that search using a hiring path. You're going to want to pay close attention to those that are open to the public with this blue people icon right here. A lot of times hiring managers will announce positions using internal to an agency for current employees and open to the public. So you want to make sure you're on the right one. Let's narrow our search clicking on that. And if you're a veteran, if this applies to you, click that as well. And students, this is for student internships and recent graduates, anyone who had graduated within the last 2 years. So let's use those 3 filters. And as you can see, it took our posting down to 57 lists, which is still a lot to navigate through. So let's refine our search even more. So for example, if you want to search for a specific agency, come back over here to your filters, scroll down to department and agency. I'm going to select Bureau of Labor Statistics. And now you can see that narrowed it down to 6 jobs. Now, if this is a search that you want to save for future openings and receive those email updates, you just simply click here, save search. You can have multiple save searches. And then once you are in here and you want to open the announcement, you simply click on the title. And I am going to hand it over to Kristen, who's going to walk you through the job opportunity announcement.
So there's a lot that we can talk about when it comes to job announcements, but for today, we're just going to do a brief overview and maybe highlight some highlights within the announcement, as well as maybe some common pitfalls that we see on the HR side. Before we even get started on that, one of my insider tips is that if you're going to apply to an announcement on USA Jobs, make sure that you read the announcement in its entirety before you apply. So today we're just going to briefly touch on certain aspects, but if you're actually going to USA Jobs to apply for a position, you're going to want to make sure that you're reading that in its entirety just to ensure that you meet the requirements for that announcement. So first off, we're going to go over to the side panel, which is also called the overview. So this section here is just going to give you some quick data items about the announcement and the position. Now there's 2 areas that I want to highlight here in the announcement. First is the open and closing dates, and particularly the close date. So for federal jobs, you're going to want to ensure that you have your application in by that close date. And the closing is 11:59 Eastern time on that date. Now I want to emphasize Eastern time, because if you're not in Eastern time, if your time zone is not in the Eastern time, you do not have until 11:59 your time to submit your application. A lot of applicants read 11:59 and they're in California and they think, oh, I've got until 11:59 to submit my application. Nope, you gotta read the details. It's 11:59 Eastern time. The next thing I want to highlight is the promotion potential on this announcement. So you can see that we're recruiting right now for an entry-level position, GS7, GS9, an economist or a statistician. However, if you look at the promotion potential, it says 12. So while this position is entry level, GS7, GS9, the promotion potential is showing that you have the potential to grow in this position all the way to the GS12 level, which is a great career ladder for this position. One last thing, if we go back up to the close date, you don't see it here on this announcement, but in other announcements, you might see a quick note under the close date that talks about an application cap. Now, if you see that on an announcement for a position that you're interested in, another insider tip, make sure you get your application in sooner rather than later, because that announcement is going to close either when that application cap is met or on the closing date of the announcement. It's going to be whichever comes first. And USA Jobs does not have any sort of ticker that's going to tell you how many applications we've received. So if you really are interested in that position, get your application in right away. So now let's go to the body of the announcement. So you have the summary, which is just basically an overview of the department, the agency, and possibly the office the position is located in. You have this job is open to, which Michelle covered with the icons, the clarification from the agency, giving you further clarification of who the announcement is open to. Now you have the major duties. Now this is not an all-encompassing list, but it is a list of some of the major duties that you can expect to perform within this position. Now we have the requirements section in the announcement. This is a key section to pay attention to. You have your conditions of employment. These are conditions that you must meet either when you're selected or when you come on board in the position. But then you also have the qualifications section. Now, this is a critical section to pay attention to, and this is where applicants get hung up very often. So you can see here, again, we're recruiting for an economist or a statistician. So for this position, there's actually a two-part qualification process. You have the basic requirement that you have to meet, as well as the specialized experience requirement. Now, the basic requirement is an education requirement that you have to meet. So you can see the economist position. It describes a degree in economics as well as coursework that you need to complete to meet that basic requirement. The statistician has a different requirement. So essentially, in reading this, what we're trying to say is one document that's really important for you to submit is your transcripts. So not only would you submit your resume, you want to ensure you submit a copy of your transcripts, because if we in HR can't verify that information, we cannot send you through. You have to prove that you meet this first requirement. Now, the second requirement is the specialized experience requirement. You have to show on your resume that you have this experience at whatever grade level you're applying for. But let's say you're looking at this and you're saying, I'm looking at the GS7, I'm really interested, but I don't think I have that experience. What's great about the entry-level grade levels is you can actually substitute your education in lieu of your experience. So you can see here the GS7 level, you can have 1 year of graduate education, or you can have superior academic achievement. The GS9, you can have 2 years of graduate education or a master's degree. But now let's say you're looking at that again and you say, well, I don't really have that full education and I don't have the full experience. I might have half and half. I have 6 months at the 7, but I also have 6 months of graduate education. The great thing is you can also do a combination. So you can combine your 6 months of experience with your 6 months of graduate education and still be found qualified for the position at the GS7 level. So now we're going to keep going down. This section is the how you will be evaluated section. This section basically lays out how your application is going to be evaluated once it's submitted. The section we really want to highlight is the preview to the questionnaire. So if you click on this, this is going to bring up some eligibility questions as well as some qualification questions for the position. We highly suggest that you open this up before you apply, just to make sure, A, that you're eligible, and B, that you would be found qualified for this position. And another insider tip is that a lot of hiring managers use this as a basis for their interview questions. So if you apply for this position and you get contacted for an interview, I would suggest coming back to this questionnaire and using it for your interview prep, as this is going to give you a good idea of maybe some questions you're going to be asked. The next section is the required document section. Again, this is a critical section for you to pay attention to. Most, if not all, federal applications are going to require at least a resume with your application. Now, something that not a lot of people know is that your resume goes through 2 layers of review. So you need to tailor your resume to both the HR specialist as well as the hiring manager. The HR specialist is going to look for different things than the hiring manager. So you want to make sure that you're looking at the description under the resume as far as what information you need. The next section or the next document is the cover letter. Now, we do not require a cover letter in human resources. However, highly recommend that you submit a cover letter with your application, as hiring managers do like to see this with applications. And then finally, again, we're going to highlight transcripts. Make sure you submit your transcripts with your application, and make sure that you're submitting all of your transcripts, as we can use all of the information across the transcripts to ensure that you meet that basic requirement. And then finally, we have the how to apply section. This is going to be the step-by-step instructions on how to apply. You have your agency contact information. Sometimes this is going to be a direct person. As you can see, this is Michelle's announcement. Sometimes, depending on the agency, it's going to be a contact center. And then finally, you have the next steps. This is what you can expect the next steps for your application after the announcement closes. I think we're going to wrap up our presentation here and we're going to send it back to Emily.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle and Kristen. That was really helpful and I'm sure very informative for our audience. Let me ask you a question, and our panelists may want to comment on how it works in their system as well. My understanding is on USA Jobs, you can construct a resume within the site, or you can actually upload your own resume that you've developed and formatted yourself. Do you have any advice as to which approach is better, or if you're going to do it one way or another, how to manage it, especially given, as you said, the two different audiences that you may be positioning yourself for?
Hi, Emily. That's a great question. So with USA Jobs, you have two different options. You can either build a resume using the USA Jobs Resume Builder, which is going to make sure that you don't miss out on any critical information that HR is going to require in order to verify your service and give you credit for your work experience and education. Or you can upload a resume of your own personal professional resume. I personally recommend that you do both. That way you have your personal professional resume that highlights your character, and then you're also making sure to include all of that critical information. A quick example for work experience start and end dates. For example, if you list 2021 to 2022, you're going to get 2 days of credit. Where if you list January 2021, so the month and year through January 2022, you're going to get a full year of credit. So I would recommend both options.
Great, that's really helpful. And that's a good tip. Do any of our other panelists have thoughts on that? Or do your systems allow people that option, or does it force people into a certain format? What's the best way to sort of take into account that you have to get through that HR screen as well as impress the specialist hiring manager? Michelle, how does it work at IHS?
So at IHS Market, you have to submit your own resume. There's no resume builder or capability within our site, which is in a way really neat because it allows people to kind of, create their resume the way they'd like to. And kind of like Michelle and Kristen were mentioning, right? You should be tailoring your resume to the job description that you're applying for. So that's something that is really important. You obviously don't want to fabricate anything you're putting on there, but to highlight the experience that is relevant to the job you're applying for. So to answer your question, you have to create and tailor your own resume. We don't have that functionality, but it does make each resume unique, which is in a way a good thing. So
each resume is unique. And also, as you point out, Michelle, each job is unique. And so it sounds like in general, and certainly my experience as well, is that an HR specialist will have reviewed your resume before the hiring manager really ever even gets to see it. And so it's important, as was pointed out, that it be very clear some of the key elements that tie to the position. And so you can't just necessarily send the same resume out over and over again because a certain position may be looking for a certain qualification. You want to make sure that's really easy for the HR manager to see, right? Great. Exactly. So let me ask everyone, maybe start with the HR representatives and then the hiring managers, because I assume the numbers are different. On average, how many resumes do you receive for each position? And how long would you say that you spend looking at each resume that comes across?
I can take this question. It really depends on a lot of different factors. I would say for entry-level positions, particularly in some of the high volume locations, it can be anywhere from 50 to 200, even more applications. And so depending on, how many we get, it's going to be a quick review for the HR specialist, like we went through in USA Jobs. We're going to just do that double check that you meet the basic requirement, and then we're going to check to see if you're minimally qualified. The hiring manager, I think, is going to do a more thorough review of your resume and just make sure that you're checking all those boxes of what they're looking for. So again, I just want to emphasize for your resume, you want to make sure that you're tailoring that to both audiences.
So if you get 200 applications for a position, typically, with the high volume ones, how many would you say come through that just don't even make your screen, that because they aren't qualified and they've applied for something that they don't they don't meet the qualifications.
Hi, Michelle again. So with our application process, you actually get scored into 3 different categories. So we have our best qualified candidates, highly qualified candidates, and qualified candidates. And the way that the scoring works is all based off of the competency-based questions that you answer, the vacancy-specific questions, and it will place you into one of those categories. We only personally reviewed the best qualified candidates for qualifications and refer them to the selecting official. And when it comes to reviewing resumes, we have to look thoroughly through every single resume in that best qualified category.
Wow, that is a huge job. So Leila and Sean, as the hiring managers, then your HR has done some screening, and feel free to let us know kind of what that screening looks like. And so when you receive the resumes, how many are you looking at, and how much time are you spending looking at each one?
So I think for us, it depends again on the position and how many slots we have open. Typically for our entry-level position, it's not that we only have one opening, we have multiple openings, either in the same location or across different locations within the system. And so therefore, we actually are looking, we try to at least look through, I would say 15 to 20 resumes per position that we hire for. Which means if we're hiring for 10 positions, we're actually also looking at close to 100 resumes at that point to narrow the pool then down narrow the pool down to a smaller number. And what we look for in the application beyond the initial screen that has been done by the HR professional, we look for certain coursework that we think is relevant and would have given our candidate the edge or the skill set that they need to have before they can take this job on. So we look for a lot of like quantitative coursework on the resume. We really prefer if the candidate has their GPA on there. We will dig through transcripts and to try to get all of that out, but we prefer if it's on there for us to be able to screen quickly. And then we also look for any relevant research experience that the candidate has had prior. So like I think one of the other, either Michelle or Kristen were mentioning, make sure when you're submitting the resume, it's tailored for the position, because if you've had an RA-ship or a teaching assistant position somewhere, that is more relevant to me as the hiring manager versus a job at the university library. That doesn't really matter to me. It shows me that yes, you're dedicated and you're passionate and you can manage your time well. It does give me that indication, but in terms of the job, and it's the skills required, I'm looking more for the relevant experience to be on that resume versus just everything that you've done.
How about you, Sean, as a hiring manager? How can a candidate make their resume stand out as you look through this virtual stack of candidates?
Yeah, I want to echo what Leila said. We follow a very similar process. When HR is referring the list of candidates to us, we're generally looking through all of the candidates and doing some sort of internal ranking of them. The one thing I'll say is it's not only necessarily kind of educational experience or research experience. As a stat agency, we're looking for people who have experience manipulating data. So we're often looking, and not only just any data, but often we're looking for business data, data at the person or the business level is particularly something that we're looking for. So that would kind of support what Leila said. Just be really cognizant of what the posting is kind of focused on, and make sure you address that. And it might be different, across the various postings. But yeah, like experience using data is also something, and it might be like through class projects and other things, and that's not really going to be reflected on the transcript. So that would be a suggestion that I have.
So it sounds like it's really important to highlight not just the title, right? What your position was or what activity you were involved in, but what you did as part of that. And obviously it can't be a book, but to highlight some of the ways in which what you did at that position was relevant. And how about certifications? I know CBE would be a great one to list on your resume, right? If you've gone through the certified business economist training that NAPE offers, highlighting those is that important? Extracurricular activities, do those things make the resume stand out, or do you have to, again, position them relative to the job you're applying for in order for that to matter?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I agree. I think the certifications are always important. So if you have a certification as fabulous as the CBE, please do list that on the resume, because then we know that you're coming in with a certain level of expertise, and we won't have to do as much training and upskilling to bring that candidate on board and get them off the ground and running. And so, yes, if you have certifications of that sort, whether that be CBE or you've done like a training class where you are proficient in some sort of open software such as Python or R, please highlight those things on the resume, because the way things are going this way, and Sean highlighted this, a lot of the work involves data manipulation, and not just small, but very, very large data sets. So we always look for those skills amongst our candidates. And extracurriculars are also important. Again, they tell us a little bit about how you would work on a team. How do you handle pressure, whether you can handle it well or not. So I think the extracurriculars helps us identify some of those soft skills within, and then distinguish between candidates in that regard.
Fantastic. All right, so let's assume that our candidates have now put together a stellar resume. It's gotten past the HR manager. The hiring manager says, this person looks super interesting. Let's bring them in for an interview. I'm going to assume that most of the interviews are still taking place virtually. So can you all talk about some of the things that you're looking for in your interviews? And maybe we'll start with again, with the HR perspective. You all may do screening calls right before the formal interview. And then we can ask Leila and Sean to comment on the follow-up interviews with the hiring managers.
I can speak for myself from my HR experience that I did not play a big role in the interview process. I did reach out to some hiring managers though within BLS just to get their thoughts on some things that they've seen, particularly with entry-level candidates. Two things that I thought stood out were keep your answers focused and concise. But don't keep them too concise, because that shows lack of interest in the position. But if you go too long, then it shows that you don't have an awareness of the interviewer's time. The other thing that I thought was a good point was make sure that you review the agency's statistics. Be familiar with the agency's reports. Be familiar, if you're going for a BLS position, read the latest BLS report. Be able to talk about what was in that report.
Great. And Michelle Goeller, does IHS, do you do any screening beyond looking at the resumes? I'll just say at Ford, I know our recruiters will actually do phone calls with the candidates before passing them along to the hiring manager for an interview. So they'll sort of send us the resumes, and then we look and we say, okay, yeah, this bunch looks interesting. They'll do phone screens with them, and so then they have to sort of pass that phone screen before we would then select candidates from that pool to do a full interview with. Is it anything like that at IHS or at the Fed?
Yeah, so most of the time, that's exactly what we do. So I personally do phone screens. I don't usually do a virtual just because I do so many phone screens. I would be locked to my computer the entire day, which would be a challenge. So I mostly do a phone screen, but just like you mentioned, it's really to pre-qualify them and see if it makes sense for the manager to speak with them. So usually it's just about their experience and then different qualifications, location, maybe comp expectations, things along those lines to see if there's an alignment. If that's then confirmed, then we set them up on a first round interview with the actual hiring manager. And then some tips for those, or some feedback that I get from those virtual interviews is that, and also kind of like Kristen said, it's usually the junior candidates that I get this feedback is that they come unprepared. So a manager will say, do you know about IHS Market? And they go, oh no, what do you guys do, right? So that's really showing a lack of preparedness for the interview. And then also a lack of professionalism, right? People wearing hats or sunglasses and things like this. And what you should wear on a virtual interview certainly varies for the position you're interviewing. Doesn't mean you have to sit there with a tie and a suit on or a dress, right? But, just figure out what the role you're interviewing is and kind of, you can ask the recruiter, hey, what do you think an appropriate attire would be for a virtual interview? Really, it depends on those factors. But that's really kind of, I think, 2 important points is make sure you know the company you're interviewing for. You should also really know the job and make sure you're dressing the part as if you were going into an office and pay attention to those details.
That's great. Thanks, Michelle. I love that. What do you guys do? Tell me.
Exactly.
That's I believe it. Leila, Sean, was there anything you wanted to add about interviews?
I think Michelle covered it really well. Just in terms of some other items to keep in mind is, yes, make sure you've researched the organization. So when the interviewer says to you that, do you have any questions for us? Make sure those questions are targeted and meaningful. They kind of relate to both the job that you have applied for and the overall mission and goal of the organization. Being familiar with that obviously helps you tailor the questions better. And so I just find it just tells the interviewer that you've put some thought into preparing for the interview before you've just shown up. And it also tells me that you're interested in the organization. The other thing I've typically liked about candidates when they're interviewing are the ones who will ask not just about the job, but also the culture of the organization. Because when they ask about the culture or, what are some of the volunteer opportunities is the Fed involved in, or how can I, serve or serve the public. I mean, there are different ways of doing it. When they ask those pointed questions, it tells us that they're not just wanting to get a job, but they want to probably make a career out of being at the Fed. And so, just showing that passion when you're interviewing always sort of stands out to the interviewer, and it leaves a mark in their mind that this candidate is really passionate about not just getting a job, but getting a job at the Fed, and they believe in our mission, and they will be a good team player when we have them on board.
Leila.
Yeah. I guess what I would add to that is I often have a group of people do the first round interviews, not necessarily a single person, because I appreciate kind of getting a diversity of kind of opinions about a candidate's qualifications. At the same time, I think it makes it a little more conversational with the candidate, right? And everyone has different perspectives. So usually I'll have kind of a panel of 3 people kind of do that first round of interviews. And the one thing I'll say is that we also kind of follow the same list of questions for all of the people that we're interviewing, right? So we're not kind of tailoring the necessarily the questions for each of the people. So you may get some things that are kind of already answered in your resume, right? But we do try to probe like a little bit further past the specialized experience and kind of dig into the candidates. But there might be some things that you covered really well that someone else didn't. And so that's why we want to kind of stick with that standard set of questions. But we try to do that for consistency and transparency when we're going through the process. So that would be kind of my addition.
Yeah. No, that's a great point, Sean. And I think that's something we experience at Ford as well, because we do use standard interview questions. And that's really for fairness, right? To make sure that everyone has the opportunity to answer the same set of questions. But the challenge with that as a candidate is that perhaps there's something that you wanted to talk about that wasn't an obvious answer to one of the questions that was asked. So hopefully at the end of the interview, you get an opportunity, is there anything else you wanted to tell us or any other questions? And you should have in your mind, if there were some really key pieces of experience that you wanted to make sure that you covered, maybe keep a note of that for yourself so you can work them in, even if they didn't come naturally to the set questions. Because sometimes those are really, interesting and maybe a little bit off the script that we have as hiring managers. So that's great. We're going to start to bring in some questions from the audience. So I just want to make sure everybody is aware of that and can put questions in, and we'll put them to the panelists here. But while we're doing that, one of the questions that was shared with us ahead of time was, if you're asked as a candidate, who else are you interviewing with? What's the best way to respond to that question? Maybe the HR managers can take that for us.
I can take that question. So honestly, there's really no right or wrong answer to that question. It's up to the individual and whatever they feel most comfortable with. However, letting an employer know the other companies you're interviewing can have its advantages because it gives the perception you are desirable and that if you're interviewing with, X company, then you must be a good candidate and you're also likely qualified for us. So it can have its advantages, but if there's particular reasons why you don't wish to share it, you can simply say something. I'm interviewing at a technology company. It's a large company. It's a startup. It's a finance company, and just use very loose details and the types of roles. I know I usually ask for timing purposes because we have to get through our process and we have a formal approval process. So it's important for me to know kind of what stages you're at. But other than that, it can be interesting to hear that and say, hey, to my hiring managers, hey, this person's also interviewing at this company. So, it just shows that they might also be valuable. So.
Certainly with the competition for good talent right now, that's probably true now more than ever. All right. How about after the interview? One question, how important is it? I know it probably seems old-fashioned, but what about sending a thank you note? How important is that? And what would a good thank you note look like? Maybe our hiring managers, because you would most likely be the recipient of that. So Leila or Sean, do you have any thoughts on that question?
Sure. I'm actually, so I'm trying to hire PhD economists right now. And I will say that it always makes the staff and the hiring manager feel, like we spent a lot of time going through this process, and I think it makes us feel appreciated. We also try to do some follow-up with candidates. If we've interviewed a bunch of people, we try to follow up with them, especially if they've indicated that they're also seeking employment with other people. Like, we're trying to keep them keep in touch with them a little bit so that they know that we're still interested. We're still kind of going through our process, so that they feel appreciated as well. So I think it kind of works both ways, but I do think it's always, I don't think there can be anything hurt. And it's always nice when it includes something a little bit personal from the interview that maybe they picked up on.
Yeah, I would echo what Sean said. I agree. I think we feel appreciated once we get the thank you note. It's not the deciding factor in terms of whether we extend the offer to a candidate or not, but it certainly is the cherry on top of the cake if you do send that note. And like Sean said, we do a similar process after every person we interview, whether we will move forward with them on a second round or not. We send them a note back saying, thank you for your time this afternoon. It was nice meeting with you. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us and we'll give them our email address. So it's just sort of a nice way to keep the conversation going.
Thank you. I know I like getting those notes as well. And as a candidate, I think it's also a chance if there was something that you felt like you should have hit harder or something that occurred to you after the interview that like, wow, this would be really relevant. It's a good chance to sort of drop that little note in. Can't be a book, but it's a good chance to just leave those little nuggets. For the hiring managers, one other thing that I wanted to ask you about is that it seems like candidates sometimes have trouble translating sort of classroom experience or volunteer experience, into workplace applications. So, obviously one great way to do that is the CBE program, right? Because it's really tailored by business economists. So sort of knowing what skills we want to see gives you an opportunity to develop those specific skills and fill those gaps that maybe you don't get in the classroom. But I've actually seen candidates use examples from working in a cafe and really effectively answer a question about, a business situation. And then a candidate use an example that seems more directly relevant to a, professional environment and not answer very well. So, how can you as an applicant, position your academic experience or your other sort of non-traditional experience in a way that's relevant to you as a hiring manager? What things do you look for? Is it back to the soft skills we talked about a little bit, as, you know, with regard to the clubs and things?
Yeah, it's a little bit back to the soft skills, being able to explain the project. I think what we look for is the kind of the methodical process. Can you go through and it doesn't have, it can be something really small. Like typically we'll ask, we will want to know, have you worked from a project from start to finish? What was the process like? Can you go through it step by step and tell me what you did first and what you did next, what came after? What was the outcome if you have one? If you haven't gotten to the outcome, what stage are you on? And so that gives us a sense of both how the candidate thinks, you know, what their, it tells us about, you know, not only how they think and how they process information, but then can they synthesize that for us and down to a 2-minute answer and walk me through the project start to finish. It gives me a sense of what their experience has been like. It'll probably tell us along the way when they're asking that question. Typically, they've worked with someone else, so we'll learn about, you know, their kind of their team working skills along the way. So we like, and that's your point. Like I think Emily, you mentioned this earlier, something you weren't able to hit hard on, or something you really want to highlight. That's your chance. That's your chance to be able to bring all those. Showcase all the skill sets that you have within that example, because typically an open-ended question is where you can use that to your advantage and showcase the skills you're wanting to in that interview.
And just to piggyback off of Layla, everything that she said, you know, kind of walking it through like that STAR approach: situation, tasks, action, results. Also, the unique thing with federal resumes is it can be lengthy. So elaborate on every little duty, work experience that you've had. Go ahead and elaborate those skills, hard skills, soft skills, your duties. And then also, as we pointed out, those KSAs, those vacancy related questions, your resume must support the way that you answer those questions. So go back through, check into your answers, and make sure that you have an entry in your resume that supports that response. And then again, transcripts are always going to be reviewed. So don't just list that you have a bachelor's degree in economics. If we don't have the transcript, we cannot give you credit for that.
While we're on qualifications, we've talked a lot about sort of, you know, coding and data skills. Obviously, that's really top of mind for a lot of positions these days. One of the questions sort of relates to the non-technical economists. So if you aren't a heavy coder or, you know, into machine learning and AI, are there jobs out there in economics for folks, you know, that focus more on the sort of the soft skills side of the discipline? Or, you know, if you have only a BS or a BA and you don't have an advanced degree in economics, what sorts of jobs are out there for those kinds of candidates?
So this is Sean. So speaking from the Census Bureau's perspective, right, we're interacting with kind of data users and data respondents a lot, right? So just being able to communicate with businesses and households and being able to communicate clearly. Lots of kind of project management activities. I mean, there's all kinds of kind of non-technical skills that are really important for a lot of positions. It's always going to be useful to have a background in economics and statistics and mathematics and some knowledge of programming, but you know, there's also data scientist tracks and statisticians and other kind of supporting positions, right? It usually takes a team to put together a survey. So I think there's lots of opportunities for economists to do a lot of to make a lot of different contributions to kind of programs.
Great, thanks. And we'll try to get through as many of these as possible. So I'm going to kind of quickly run through a couple of these. One is that, you know, we talked about posting certifications, and there's a question around certifications in things like R and Stata that may be done through LinkedIn Learning. Is that something that you should add? I think short answer is yes, right? If you have a certification, you know, you should add it, be transparent about what the source is. Okay. Then there are a couple about sort of questions that you can ask during the interview process. When is it appropriate to sort of start interviewing the company and, ask about, the work style and the culture and so on. If you do it too early, then you're sort of being presumptive. If you wait too late, then you might be like, wow, I wasted my time. I don't like those answers. So when do you ask about that? When is it okay to reach back out to the company if you haven't heard? How about negotiating the date or the salary? Maybe our HR managers can kind of lead on some of those questions. What can you ask of the company and when?
Does someone else want to go? Do you want me to go?
I can start off with just in terms of when to ask about the company and the culture. I think you can ask that question in the very first interview. You don't have to wait for the second or the third round to ask about the company, its culture, what its values are, because if you really want to be happy in a role, you have to enjoy the company that you work. You have to enjoy the work environment. You have to like the people you work with. You have to be in sync with the values the company holds. And unless that doesn't match up, the job is not going to be a good match for you. So I say you ask that up front in the very first interview. Typically, the way when we do interviews in the first round, after we've asked our set of questions, we'll usually leave about 5 to 10 minutes for the candidate to ask any questions they have of us. I'm assuming that's the norm for other organizations as well. And that's your opportunity to ask about the culture, like I said, the values of the company, and any other queries you might have.
Great. And Kristen, Michelle, how about, if it's been a while, you haven't heard, when is it appropriate to reach out? And then maybe we can tack on to that, how about asking for things like deferrals or negotiating the salary if you do receive an offer? What's the best way to sort of navigate that? That's a bit of a landmine, isn't it?
So as far as reaching out to check the status of your application, there's multiple ways you can do that. You can log into USA Jobs, and with that created profile, you can manage your application. So you can see what step it is in the process. And also we send out notifications, different touch points throughout the process. So once your application has been received and we verify that it's successful, we'll send you an email once it's been referred or not referred to the selecting official. And also if you've been selected or not. Always there's an HR contact listed in every single vacancy announcement on USA Jobs. So feel free at any time to reach out to the HR specialist, and that they should be able to provide you an answer as well. As far as negotiating salaries, typically with the positions that we hire into, there's not a large opportunity to negotiate that salary unless the announcement is listed as required for superior qualifications or special needs. So we do get a lot of applicants. They are entry level, so negotiating salary, it doesn't hurt, but oftentimes we're not able to grant that.
And I will say for Ford, we've had those situations, and you would need to have an offer letter that you could share with our HR in order for them to evaluate, whether we could even consider matching that other offer. But just sort of, randomly negotiating is, as you said, Michelle, pretty difficult to do. There was another question about citizenship for government positions, Michelle. So while I got you up, just briefly, are there any positions that would be open to a non-citizen? Obviously, as Kristen said earlier, reading the qualifications very carefully for all the positions is important, but would there be any out there?
Sure, that's a great question. So for federal employment, and specifically the jobs that we recruit for, if it's announced delegated examining, those are positions that are open to US citizens. There is pathways, recent graduate, and the student internships that upon your first trial period, that first year, you're not required to be a citizen in order to be hired into that pathways role. However, in order to convert you to a permanent appointment, you do have to have your citizenship.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I think we're going to get ready to wrap up. We're going to put I think some slides up with the resources for each individual company. And if we have maybe 30 seconds each, if any of our panelists want to sort of run through what is shown here.
I think the first slide you have up is for the Federal Reserve. Like I said, we have 12 banks and as well as the Board of Governors, which makes us 13 organizations within a system, and we hire a lot of people throughout the year, but this is sort of our peak recruiting period. It starts in September, runs all the way through, end of February, early March. So if you are interested in a position and working for the Fed, whether that be for any of our summer internships or our research analyst program or our economist program, we are currently in the middle of hiring. We're in the middle of interviewing as well. So I have the links listed up here on the slide. Please go ahead and check them out and see what postings we have available, not just at the Dallas Fed, but like I said, the San Francisco Fed, the New York Fed, the Minneapolis Fed, the Board of Governors in DC, we all are in the middle of hiring. So please go ahead and check those links out and see if there's something that matches up with your skill set and something that you're passionate about and would like to apply for. Thank you.
Great. So this is a link to our career site. We have hundreds of jobs posted. We are a global organization and have many locations throughout the US. These are entry level up to executive director level positions. So please feel free to check out our site. And do remember, we will be merging with S&P Global in the near future. So we will eventually be fully integrated with them. Thanks.
Sean, is this yours?
Yeah. So the Census Bureau has, in addition to pathways and some of the other kind of internship and hiring programs that the BLS folks mentioned, we've stood up an economic measurement and research internship program that's using a different hiring authority. And so it's a little bit more informal than USA Jobs. So one thing that I would encourage people to do is to do some searching to find out if agencies have other programs that might not be through USA Jobs. I think we have a postdoc program that also uses, if I use jargon, it's some Schedule A hiring authorities within the government. So that's kind of one program. And then we do try to make it a little bit easier for people to understand what it's like for an economist to work at the Census Bureau. It's kind of geared towards PhD economists. And actually, on kind of that third link below is we have a link that takes you right to all of the Census Bureau postings for the Economist series. So there was kind of a search that you were shown kind of in USA Jobs that's kind of set up, and we have a kind of a search link that we send people to on the Economist website. So, and there's also a blog about the kind of research that PhD economists do at the Census Bureau, the kind of research they do. And we typically go to the AEA meetings in January. That kind of kicks off the PhD kind of recruiting season. So it talks a little bit about the kind of research that economists do at the Census Bureau. So.
At the bottom of this slide, you'll find a link, which is all encompassing for the federal government nationwide, any unique hiring paths that are relevant to students and recent graduates. So we thought that was important to share with you. And also on the next slide is both Kristen and myself's contact information, the website for Department of Labor and Bureau of Labor Statistics. And again, that link for USA Jobs. As you saw today during our demo, we had 6 positions open as of today for the Bureau of Labor Statistics, but it's constantly revolving. So don't be discouraged if you don't see a location or position that meets your needs. Keep that safe search. Highly recommend you to log back in frequently and check your status. And we look forward to networking with you and answering any questions you may have. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I believe we're going to make these slides available to all the folks registered for the call. So you have the wonderful resources that all of our panelists provided. We've gone about 5 minutes over, so I apologize for that, but I think it was well worth it. It was absolutely wonderful to hear from everyone on the call today. And I think we caught all the questions, but our NAPE colleagues will go through and make sure we didn't miss anything and put you in touch if there's a question that requires follow-up. So with that, I will thank all of our panelists so much for taking the time to provide these wonderful insights today. And thank you all for being part of the NAPE community. And I wish everyone the best of luck in their search and hiring. Have a great afternoon.
Great, thanks, Emily. And before we disconnect, as a reminder, recordings of past webinars are available in the news feed on the NAPE Connect app, which can be downloaded in the App Store and through Google Play. NAPE members can also access webinar recordings through the digital archive on nape.com. Today's program is copyright 2022 by the National Association for Business Economics with all rights reserved. This concludes the webinar. Thank you for participating.